January 15th, 1997. How could a man, labeled by Interpol as Target 1, evade conviction time and again, amass millions, and operate at the center of Europe's most dangerous drug networks without being caught? Curtis Warren, later known as the Teflon Gangster, became infamous not just for the scale of his operations, but for his uncanny ability to slip through the cracks of justice. By the age of 32, he was already a key player in a web of cocaine, heroin, ecstasy, and hashish smuggling that stretched from Colombia to the streets of Britain. Yet, despite mounting evidence and high-profile investigations, Warren walked free from trial after trial, exploiting legal loopholes and benefiting from political missteps that left authorities scrambling. His story is one of audacity, cunning, and relentless ambition, punctuated by farcical court proceedings, secret trials, and dramatic arrests. As we trace his rise, the empire he built, and the eventual downfall that caught even the cleverest criminal off guard, the line between genius and lawbreaker blurs in ways few could have imagined. Curtis Warren was born in 1967 in Liverpool, a city still recovering from economic hardship and social unrest. He grew up in a large family, where money was always tight and life demanded early resilience. From a young age, Warren displayed a restless energy, a mix of curiosity, ambition, and defiance that would later define his path. School offered little refuge. He struggled academically and left without formal qualifications. Yet, even in these early years, glimpses of creativity emerged. Warren had a talent for drawing, particularly cartoons and portraits of rock icons, hinting at a side of him that valued expression and skill. Despite these artistic inclinations, the streets of Liverpool provided a different education. By the age of 9, Warren had begun exploring petty crime, small acts that seemed harmless at the time, but laid the groundwork for his later life in organized crime. Influenced by the rough environment around him, he observed patterns of risk, reward, and negotiation that would become second nature. Friends, mentors, and local figures introduced him to opportunities that straddled both legitimate and illicit worlds. Warren's interest in art continued alongside his growing involvement in criminal activities. Apprenticeships in graphic design and studies in sign writing allowed him to refine discipline and attention to detail, skills that would later translate into meticulous planning in his illegal ventures. This combination of streetwise cunning and creative intelligence set him apart from peers, allowing him to navigate complex social and operational networks from an early age. By his teenage years, Warren had already learned to balance two lives: the disciplined, creative side that thrived in art, and the daring, risk-taking side that found its outlet in crime. This duality would become a defining feature of his character, influencing decisions, alliances, and strategies in the years to come. It was a foundation built on survival, ambition, and an unusual blend of ingenuity and audacity that would propel him into Europe's most notorious criminal networks. By the early 1980s, Curtis Warren had moved far beyond petty street crimes. His early brushes with the law in Liverpool were only the beginning. As a teenager, he started experimenting with small-scale smuggling, importing minor amounts of drugs and distributing them locally. These activities, while risky, taught him the fundamentals of logistics, negotiation, and secrecy. It was a world where timing and trust could mean the difference between profit and prison, and Warren learned these lessons quickly. During this period, he began forming crucial partnerships. One of the most significant was with Brian Charrington, a seasoned career criminal from Middlesbrough. Their alliance was built on mutual ambition and complementary skills. Warren brought audacity and street intelligence, while Charrington had established networks and experience in larger operations. Together, they began orchestrating more ambitious ventures, moving from local deals to cross-border smuggling schemes. The duo's operations eventually caught the attention of international networks, including Colombia's infamous Cali cartel. In what would become a defining moment in Warren's career, He and Charrington allegedly negotiated a deal to import 900 kilograms of high-grade cocaine concealed in scrap ingots. Unknown to them, British Customs and the Northeast Regional Crime Squad were already monitoring their activities. The operation collapsed, but it revealed the scale of ambition Warren had cultivated. Even in failure, his name started circulating within Europe's criminal underworld. Warren's methods were precise and calculated. He relied on a combination of careful surveillance, trusted intermediaries, and a network of contacts across ports and cities. Operations were planned meticulously, often involving multiple countries and layers of concealment. Aluminium ingots, secret compartments, and coded communications became standard practice. By the mid-1990s, Warren was no longer a local smuggler. He was orchestrating a multi-million-pound enterprise spanning the UK, the Netherlands, and beyond. The scale of his criminal network was staggering. Collaborators included trusted lieutenants like Stephen Mee and Stephen Whitehead, who managed different facets of the business, from distribution to logistics. At its peak, Warren's operation could move hundreds of kilograms of cocaine, heroin, ecstasy, and hashish across borders, generating tens of millions of pounds in revenue. Yet, despite its size, the organization relied on secrecy, calculated risk-taking, and the ability to navigate both legal loopholes and the unpredictable dangers of the criminal underworld. This rise in crime, the formation of complex networks, and early international connections set the stage for the dramatic events to follow. High-stakes arrests, legal battles, and the eventual confrontation with justice that would define Warren's life in ways he could never fully control. By the mid-1990s, Curtis Warren's operations had evolved into a sprawling criminal enterprise with international reach. One of the most ambitious and ultimately infamous ventures involved a massive cocaine shipment valued at around $250 million. This was no ordinary deal. The cocaine, sourced from Colombia, was to be smuggled into Europe using intricate concealment methods. Shipping containers were modified, goods were disguised, and layers of intermediaries were employed to distance Warren from the actual transaction. It was high risk, high reward, and it marked a turning point in his criminal career. British law enforcement, however, had been closely monitoring Warren and his network for years. The Northeast Regional Crime Squad, working with the National Crime Squad, coordinated extensive surveillance operations, tracking movements across ports, warehouses, and known associates. The investigation also involved collaboration with Dutch and Belgian authorities, reflecting the growing importance of cross-border policing in tackling international drug trafficking. Every call, meeting, and shipment was meticulously monitored, building a case that would eventually bring Warren to justice. Despite the intensity of the investigations, Warren displayed remarkable cunning. He employed a combination of low-profile travel, decoy shipments, and trusted intermediaries to stay ahead of the law. Accomplices like Stephen Mee and Stephen Whitehead were essential to these strategies. Mee, known for his logistical skills, managed shipments and contacts, while Whitehead acted as a critical link between Warren and European suppliers. Their coordination allowed Warren to operate on a scale few British criminals had ever attempted. Yet, even with sophisticated planning, not everything went according to plan. The $250 million cocaine deal ultimately collapsed, foiled by surveillance and international intelligence sharing. The seizure was one of the largest in UK history at the time, underscoring both the ambition of Warren's operations and the risks inherent in the business. For Warren, it was a dramatic setback, but not the end. His ability to evade immediate capture became legendary. Notable escapes included narrowly avoiding arrest during a police raid in the Netherlands and slipping from custody during transit between prisons, demonstrating both his resourcefulness and the limitations of law enforcement at the time. Warren's operations were defined not only by their scale, but also by the layers of secrecy and trust embedded within his network. From multi-ton shipments to intricate financial arrangements, the enterprise required precise timing and absolute loyalty. Every move was calculated, every associate vetted, and every operation executed with a focus on minimizing exposure. These elements combined to create an organization that, for a time, seemed untouchable. The collapse of major deals, the surveillance pressure, and the dramatic escapes all contributed to a tense narrative, one that set the stage for the eventual confrontation with international authorities. It was a world where fortune and freedom could vanish in an instant, and for Curtis Warren, the line between dominance and capture was growing ever thinner. By the late 1990s, Curtis Warren was no longer just a shadowy figure in Europe's drug trade. He had become a headline-grabbing symbol of the difficulties authorities faced in tackling international crime. His arrest and subsequent trials revealed a tangled web of legal maneuvers, loopholes, and high-profile controversies. One of the most striking elements of Warren's legal battles was the use of procedural delays. Multiple adjournments stretched cases over years, frustrating investigators and keeping Warren free long enough to maintain influence over his network. Courts struggled with complex extradition laws, conflicting jurisdictional claims, and intricate legal arguments crafted by top defense teams. Political interference also played a subtle but notable role. In certain instances, politicians and government officials became entangled in debates over extradition agreements and diplomatic protocols. Questions arose about whether Warren's connections or the sheer audacity of his crimes had drawn attention from circles capable of slowing the wheels of justice. These delays allowed him to exploit gaps in the system, raising questions about the balance between legal fairness and public safety. Some proceedings were conducted behind closed doors, creating further tension. Secret hearings were ordered to protect sensitive intelligence or ongoing investigations, but the lack of transparency fueled speculation. Evidence controversies became a recurring theme. Surveillance methods, wiretaps, and informant testimony were scrutinized, with defense teams challenging the admissibility and credibility of critical materials. Every legal argument became a chess match, with Warren's team exploiting minor technicalities to avoid conviction. The media closely followed these developments, turning trials into public spectacles. Newspapers and television programs debated the effectiveness of law enforcement and the justice system, often framing Warren as either a cunning criminal genius or an example of systemic failure. Public opinion was sharply divided. Some viewed him as untouchable, a Teflon gangster who manipulated the law with skill and charm. Others criticized the authorities for delays that allowed such a dangerous figure to operate freely for so long. Throughout this period, Warren's legal saga exemplified the intersection of crime, politics, and media. Each adjournment, court controversy, and legal loophole added layers of suspense, keeping both the public and law enforcement on edge. The drawn-out trials were more than battles over guilt or innocence. They were a reflection of the challenges posed by sophisticated criminal networks operating across borders. By the time convictions were finally secured, the story had already become a cautionary tale of ambition, cunning, and the fragile limits of justice. By the early 2000s, Curtis Warren's years of eluding authorities were coming to a dramatic end. Operation Crayfish, a coordinated effort between British law enforcement and Dutch police, targeted his sprawling international network. On a cold morning, simultaneous raids struck Rotterdam and Amsterdam, seizing key properties linked to Warren and his associates. Investigators found thousands of kilograms of cocaine, stockpiles of weapons, and even explosives, exposing the full scale of a criminal empire that had operated with near impunity for over a decade. The operation marked a turning point in Warren's story. For years, he had slipped through the cracks, exploiting legal loopholes and sophisticated smuggling techniques. His arrest was not just the result of luck, it was a painstaking effort combining intelligence, surveillance, and cross-border coordination. Officials highlighted the complexity of tracking a figure like Warren, whose network spanned multiple countries and included both seasoned traffickers and opportunistic accomplices. Among them, Stephen Mee and Stephen Whitehead played pivotal roles, each with specific responsibilities that helped maintain the flow of drugs and launder profits. Their involvement, alongside Warren's leadership, underscored the organizational sophistication of the operation. The ensuing trials revealed the evidence gathered during Operation Crayfish in stark detail. Witnesses, surveillance records, and financial trails painted a picture of meticulous planning and high-risk operations. The courts listened to accounts of secret shipments hidden in containers, covert meetings in European cities, and the extensive use of front companies to mask illicit activity. Throughout, Warren's legal defense attempted to challenge the validity of certain evidence, but the sheer volume and consistency of the case left little room for doubt. When convictions were finally handed down, the sentences reflected the severity of the crimes. Warren received a lengthy prison term, cementing his status as a cautionary tale of ambition, cunning, and ultimate accountability. Co-accused members, including Me and Whitehead, also faced substantial sentences, demonstrating that no part of the network could escape scrutiny. Authorities emphasized that the case was a testament to international cooperation and persistence in combating organized crime. Statements from police and prosecutors highlighted the importance of coordinated intelligence and the challenges of dismantling criminal enterprises that operate across borders. Operation Crayfish closed a defining chapter in the story of Curtis Warren. The arrest and conviction did more than remove a powerful figure from Europe's criminal underworld. It exposed the vulnerabilities, strategies, and audacity of one of the most notorious drug networks in British history. For law enforcement, it was a hard-won victory. For the public, it was proof that even the most elusive criminals could eventually face justice. The conviction of Curtis Warren and his key associates sent shockwaves through the criminal underworld. Operation Crayfish had dismantled one of the most sophisticated drug networks Britain had ever seen, exposing not only the scale of illicit operations, but also the vulnerabilities of those who had operated with seeming impunity for years. With warehouses emptied, bank accounts frozen, and accomplices behind bars, the network Warren built over decades was effectively destroyed. The arrest and prosecution demonstrated that even the most entrenched criminal enterprises could be dismantled with persistence, coordination, and international cooperation. The financial impact was enormous. Millions in assets were seized, and hundreds of kilograms of cocaine removed from circulation. For local communities, the sudden collapse of a major trafficking network brought temporary relief, but also uncertainty. Those who had relied on the enterprise, willingly or not, faced legal consequences or financial ruin. Authorities noted that the disruption created a temporary power vacuum in European drug markets, leading to a scramble among rival gangs to fill the void. Socially, the case sparked public debate about law enforcement, policing strategies, and the risks of organized crime. Media coverage highlighted the audacity and reach of Warren's operation, humanizing the story with personal anecdotes while emphasizing the consequences of a life of crime. Politicians and law enforcement officials cited the case as proof that long-term investigations, cross-border cooperation, and persistent legal action could achieve results, even against criminals who had evaded capture for years. The ripple effects extended across the UK and Europe. Organized crime groups adapted, often becoming more cautious, more secretive, and more fragmented. While Warren's network was gone, the lessons learned shaped policing strategies and intelligence-sharing protocols for years to come. His downfall marked both an end and a beginning, the closure of one notorious criminal chapter, and a new era in law enforcement's approach to international drug trafficking. Curtis Warren's story is one of contrasts, a man who could charm, calculate, and evade with extraordinary skill, yet whose actions left a trail of destruction across communities and continents. Known as the Teflon Gangster, Warren managed to operate under the radar for years, exploiting legal loopholes, navigating international borders, and outsmarting authorities. His criminal persona combined audacity with meticulous planning. While some accounts humanize him, highlighting his intelligence and strategic mind, the broader picture is clear. Warren's legacy is measured not in respect, but in the vast network of crime he built and the risks he imposed on society. Law enforcement, despite ultimately succeeding in dismantling his empire, faced repeated challenges. Delays, adjournments, and procedural hurdles allowed Warren to evade capture and maintain operations longer than most imagined possible. Political interference, whether in the form of oversight complications or bureaucratic hesitation, also played a role in prolonging legal proceedings. These gaps demonstrated the complexity of tackling organized crime that operates across multiple jurisdictions, each with its own legal system and priorities. At the same time, Warren's downfall illustrates the power of cross-border cooperation. Operations like Crayfish, involving Dutch and British authorities, highlighted how coordinated intelligence, surveillance, and strategic raids can disrupt even the most sophisticated criminal networks. The case became a template for tackling transnational crime, emphasizing meticulous planning, international liaison, and the persistent application of legal pressure. Ultimately, Warren's saga is a study in how ambition, cunning, and opportunity converge to create criminal empires. He leveraged his background, connections, and understanding of the system to his advantage. Yet his story also underscores the limits of individual skill against collective law enforcement effort. The destruction of his network, the imprisonment of co-conspirators, and the ripple effects on organized crime in the UK and Europe serve as reminders that no enterprise, however sophisticated, is invulnerable. Curtis Warren's narrative leaves a complex legacy. It is a tale of risk and reward, of intelligence used for illicit gain, and of the persistent pursuit of justice that eventually caught up with him. For law enforcement and society alike, it is a cautionary reflection on the enduring tension between criminal ingenuity and institutional resilience, a story where the shadows of audacity meet the light of accountability. Curtis Warren's story is more than a tale of crime and cunning. It is a reminder of the thin line between ambition and lawlessness. As we reflect on his rise and eventual capture, the broader lesson is clear. Criminal empires thrive when vigilance, coordination, and awareness are lacking. Understanding these stories is not about glorifying the individuals behind them. It is about learning how societies, law enforcement agencies, and citizens can recognize the signs, take preventive action, and support systems that disrupt organized crime before it escalates. If you have followed this journey, consider the impact of cross-border criminal networks and the extraordinary lengths authorities must go to dismantle them. Curtis Warren's operations spanned countries, relied on sophisticated smuggling methods, and manipulated legal loopholes. Yet, his eventual arrest and conviction demonstrate the power of persistence, international cooperation, and careful intelligence work. This story urges us to stay informed and engaged, recognizing that crime does not exist in isolation. It affects families, communities, and national economies alike. Support transparency and accountability by staying aware of local and international developments in law enforcement. When news breaks of investigations, raids, or legal proceedings against organized crime figures, engage critically with the information. Share factual insights responsibly and avoid spreading rumors. Knowledge itself is a form of resistance against the secrecy that enables criminal networks to operate. By understanding the structures, methods, and risks involved, you contribute to a culture of vigilance that protects communities. For those interested in law, journalism, or social advocacy, Curtis Warren's case highlights the value of cross-disciplinary awareness. Whether you are studying criminal justice, following investigative reporting, or participating in community safety initiatives, your role can make a difference. Every effort, whether raising awareness, reporting suspicious activity, or supporting policy reform, adds pressure against organized crime and reinforces the systems designed to prevent it. Finally, take inspiration from the lessons embedded in this saga. Ambition and intelligence are powerful forces. When channeled positively, They build careers, communities, and innovation. Conversely, when exploited for illicit gain, they leave devastation in their wake. Encourage critical thinking, empathy for victims, and proactive engagement with societal issues. Share this story with others to spark conversations about crime prevention, ethics, and justice. Curtis Warren's journey may have ended behind bars, but the lessons it offers remain relevant. By staying informed, engaged, and responsible, we ensure that criminal audacity is met with accountability and that society remains resilient against the allure of illicit power. Engage, reflect, and act. Let knowledge be your guide and accountability your principle. Share this story, discuss its lessons, and commit to understanding the complex forces that shape organized crime, because awareness is the first step toward prevention.